The gunshot echoed across the Wyoming prairie as Thea Crawford clutched her bleeding side, the pain searing through her body with each desperate step. Behind her, dust clouds rose from the hooves of her pursuers, men who wouldn't stop until she was dead or worse. Night was falling fast, and with it, her chances of survival dwindled until she spotted a weathered barn silhouetted against the darkening October sky of 1875. Thomas Calloway had just finished feeding his horses when he heard the commotion outside. The barn door creaked open, and a woman stumbled in, her dress torn and stained with blood. She collapsed onto the hay-strewn floor, her auburn hair falling across her face as she struggled to remain conscious. "Please," she whispered, her green eyes finding his before they fluttered closed. Thomas rushed to her side, his heart hammering in his chest. He removed his worn leather coat and wrapped it around her trembling form. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding. "I'll never leave you." He didn't know who she was or what trouble followed her, but in that moment, Thomas made a promise he intended to keep. Carefully lifting her, he felt warm blood seeping through his shirt. The wound looked serious, but not fatal if tended to quickly. Thomas gently touched her shoulder. "I need to tend to your wound. Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slightly, confusion and fear evident in their depths. "They'll come for me," she managed. "Not tonight, they won't," Thomas replied, his voice low and determined. "First light's hours away, and no one travels these parts after dark. Let me help you." She gave a slight nod, and Thomas set to work. He cleaned the wound a bullet had grazed her side, tearing flesh but thankfully not lodging inside, and stitched it carefully. She bit down on a folded piece of leather, muffling her cries as the needle pierced her skin. When he finished, Thomas helped her drink some water and a small amount of whiskey for the pain. "My name's Thomas Calloway," he said, pulling a chair beside the bed. "This is my ranch." "Thea," she replied weakly. "Thea Crawford." "Miss Crawford, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but you're safe here for now. Try to rest." Thomas watched as she drifted into an uneasy sleep. Then he took his rifle, checked it was loaded, and positioned himself by the window. Whoever had shot her might still be searching, and he intended to be ready. Dawn broke with no sign of pursuers. Thomas had dozed intermittently, always waking with a start at the smallest sound. He checked on Thea again. Her breathing was even, though her forehead felt warm. He prepared coffee and a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush, then heard movement from the bedroom. Thea was attempting to sit up, her face contorted with pain. "Easy now," Thomas said, hurrying to help her. "That wound needs time." "I can't stay," she insisted, though she lacked the strength to rise further. "They'll find me, and then you'll be in danger too." Thomas placed a gentle but firm hand on her shoulder. "You're not going anywhere in this condition. Now, who's after you?" Thea's eyes welled with tears. "Men who work for Victor Blackwood. I was his. He called me his fiancée, but I was more his prisoner. When I refused to marry him, she stopped, her breath catching." Thomas nodded grimly. He knew of Blackwood, a wealthy cattle baron with political ambitions and a reputation for ruthlessness. The man owned half the county and had the other half in his pocket. "I escaped 2 days ago," she continued. "Took one of his horses. His men caught up to me yesterday evening." "And shot you," Thomas finished. "How'd you get away?" A hint of pride crossed her face. "I'm a better shot than they expected. Hit one in the shoulder. Created enough confusion to make a run for it." Thomas couldn't help but admire her courage. "Well, Miss Crawford, you picked a good place to hide. My land isn't much, but it's far enough from Blackwood's holdings that his men don't often venture this way." "You don't understand," Thea said, her voice rising with urgency. "Victor won't stop. He sees me as his property." "Then we'll need to be ready," Thomas replied simply. "But first you need to heal. Eat something if you can. Over the next few days, Thea regained some strength. The fever that had worried Thomas broke, and color returned to her cheeks. He learned she was 22, orphaned at 18 when her father, a small-time prospector, died in a mining accident. With no family and few options, she'd taken a position as a companion to Victor Blackwood's ailing mother. After the old woman died, Blackwood had made his clear intentions that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with possessing the beautiful young woman who had caught his eye. He never struck me, Thea explained as she sat on the porch one evening, wrapped in a blanket despite the mild weather. He didn't need to. The threat was always there in how he spoke, how he looked at me, how his men watched my every move. Thomas listened, his jaw tightening with each detail. He'd met men like Blackwood during and after the war, men who believed their wealth and power entitled them to whatever they wanted. "What will you do now?" he asked. Thea looked out at the rolling landscape, painted gold by the setting sun. "I thought I might head to California. Start fresh where no one knows me." "That's a long journey for a woman alone," Thomas observed. "I don't have much choice," she replied softly. Thomas wanted to argue but held his tongue. Instead, he showed her how to care for the horses and mend fences. She proved a quick learner, eager to earn her keep during her recovery. He found himself watching her more than he should, admiring not just her beauty, but her determination and spirit. A week after her arrival, they spotted riders approaching from the east. Thomas counted 3 men, still too distant to identify. "Get inside," he told Thea, handing her his pistol. "If things go bad, there's a trapdoor under the rug by the stove. It leads to a root cellar. Take the back way out if you need to." Fear flashed in her eyes, but she nodded resolutely and disappeared into the cabin. Thomas waited on the porch, rifle resting casually across his lap. As the riders drew closer, he recognized the lead man, Sheriff Bill Haskell, a decent sort who'd helped Thomas with rustlers 2 seasons back. "Afternoon, Thomas," the sheriff called as they reined in. "Been a while." "Sheriff," Thomas nodded, relaxing slightly, but keeping the rifle visible. "What brings you out this way?" Haskell dismounted, his deputies remaining on their horses. "Looking for someone. Young woman, auburn hair. Might be injured." He studied Thomas's face carefully. "Heard anything?" Thomas maintained a neutral expression. "Can't say I have. Something happen?" Victor Blackwood claimed she stole from him before running off. "Valuable jewelry, family heirlooms." "That's so," Thomas replied, his tone giving nothing away. "And I suppose she shot herself while stealing these heirlooms." A flicker of understanding passed between the men. Haskell had been sheriff long enough to know when a powerful man was spinning tales. "That's the curious part," Haskell said. "Blackwood's man Jenkins has a bullet in his shoulder. Claims she shot him unprovoked." Thomas's laugh was short and humorless. "Jenkins always was a poor liar. That man couldn't track a wounded buffalo through fresh snow." The sheriff rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Blackwood's offering a substantial reward. Got half the county looking." "Must be some mighty precious jewelry," Thomas remarked. "Must be," Haskell agreed, then lowered his voice. "Thomas, if you did happen to come across this woman, you might want to consider that Blackwood's reach is long. And I can't be everywhere at once." The warning was clear. Thomas nodded his appreciation. "I'll keep that in mind, Sheriff. Care for some coffee before you ride on?" Haskell shook his head. "Better not. Got ground to cover before dark." He mounted his horse, then paused. "Take care, Thomas. Been hearing rumors of rustlers working these parts again." After the lawman departed, Thomas found Thea in the cabin, the pistol clutched in white-knuckled hands. "It was the sheriff," he explained. "Blackwood's claiming you stole jewelry from him." "That's a lie," Thea exclaimed. "I took nothing but the clothes on my back and one of his horses, which I set free once I reached the foothills." I believe you, Thomas assured her. But it means he's serious about finding you. Sheriff Haskell's a good man, but he's just one man against Blackwood's influence. Thea sank into a chair, the weight of her situation pressing down on her. I should leave. Tonight. And go where? Thomas challenged. In your condition, with no horse, no supplies? You wouldn't make it 10 miles. I can't stay here and put you in danger, she insisted. Thomas knelt before her, gently taking the pistol and setting it aside. Thea, listen to me. I meant what I said that first night. I won't leave you to face this alone. Something shifted in her expression, surprise, followed by a tentative hope. Why would you risk so much for a stranger? Thomas considered his answer carefully. Maybe I'm tired of being alone out here. Maybe I recognize something in you, a fighter who deserves a chance.
He paused.
Or maybe I just can't abide men like Blackwood thinking they own people. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Thomas felt something stir within him that had been dormant since before the war. Something he'd thought lost amid the blood and chaos of battle. That night, they formulated a plan. They couldn't stay at the ranch indefinitely. Blackwood's men would eventually return in force. But Thea wasn't strong enough yet for a long journey. They needed time and allies. I have a friend, Thomas said as they sat by the fire. Jackson Freeman. Fought with him in the war. He runs a trading post near the Shoshone Reservation, about 3 days' ride north. Blackwood has no influence there. Would he help us? Thea asked. Jackson owes me his life twice over, Thomas replied. And he hates men like Blackwood even more than I do. They decided to leave in 2 days, taking a route through the mountains where they'd be harder to track. Thomas spent the next day preparing packing supplies, choosing his most reliable horses, and hiding valuables in case Blackwood's men ransacked his home in his absence. Thea insisted on helping despite her injury, demonstrating a practical knowledge that surprised him. She mended clothes, prepared travel food, and even helped Thomas clean and check his firearms. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12, she explained as she competently loaded a revolver. Said a woman alone in the West needs to protect herself. I never thought I'd need those skills until Blackwood, Thomas finished. Your father was right. He would have liked you, Thea said softly, a sad smile touching her lips. He distrusted most men, but he respected those who worked the land, who built something with their own hands. Thomas felt an unexpected warmth at her words. I wish I could have met him. They set out before dawn, leaving the ranch quiet and seemingly abandoned. Thomas led the way on his gelding, Thunder, while Thea rode his more docile mare, Willow. They kept to game trails and stream beds where possible, Thomas constantly watching for signs of pursuit. By midday, they'd climbed high enough to look back over the valley. Thomas pointed out landmarks, the silver ribbon of the river, the distant smudge of the town of Pinecrest, and far to the south, the sprawling holdings of the Blackwood Ranch. It's beautiful, Thea said, gazing at the landscape. I never really saw it before. Was always too afraid to appreciate it. Wyoming gets in your blood, Thomas replied. I've seen prettier country, but none that felt like home the way this does. How long have you had your ranch? 7 years. Bought it with my army pay and a loan from the bank in Pinecrest. Wasn't much at first, broken fences, leaky roof, and more rattlesnakes than cattle. He smiled at the memory. But it was mine. They made camp that evening in a sheltered hollow, keeping the fire small. Thomas checked Thea's wound and was pleased to see it healing well, though she winced when she dismounted. Another day's ride and we'll reach Miller's Pass, he said as they ate a simple meal of beans and jerky. After that, it's easier going to Jackson's place. Thea nodded, her face thoughtful in the firelight. And then what? I can't hide forever. One step at a time, Thomas counseled. Jackson has connections with the territorial judge. If we can get sworn statements about Blackwood's treatment of you, It might be enough to keep him at bay. You really believe that? Thea asked skeptically. Thomas sighed. I have to. The alternative is that he's untouchable, and I refuse to accept that. They fell silent, listening to the night sounds of the mountains, the distant howl of wolves, the rustle of wind through pine needles. It was peaceful, almost making them forget the danger that pursued them, until the crack of a rifle shattered the stillness. Thomas reacted instantly, throwing himself at Thea and rolling them both away from the fire as a bullet kicked up dirt where she'd been sitting. They scrambled behind a boulder as a second shot splintered bark from a nearby tree. Blackwood's men, Thea whispered, her voice remarkably steady. Thomas peered cautiously around the rock. No. Positioning's wrong. I'd guess 2, maybe 3 bandits. Probably spotted our fire and figured we'd be easy pickings. Another shot rang out, closer this time. They were being flanked. I need to draw them out, Thomas decided. When I move, you take this. He handed her his revolver. Anyone comes around that side, you shoot. Don't hesitate. Before she could protest, Thomas darted to another position, firing his rifle as he moved. A cry of pain told him he'd hit one of their attackers. He dropped behind a fallen log, reloaded quickly, and waited. A shadow moved to his left. Thomas fired again, heard cursing, then the sound of retreating footsteps. One down, at least one more to go. Suddenly, a man appeared behind Thea, grabbing her before she could turn. Thomas's heart stopped as he saw the glint of a knife at her throat. Drop the gun, cowboy, the man called, his voice raspy. Or the lady gets opened up real nice. Thomas stood slowly, rifle pointed at the ground. Easy now. We don't have much, just some food and basic supplies. Take it and go. The bandit laughed. Oh, I'll take what I want. Starting with your horses, then maybe some time with your pretty friend here. Thomas saw Thea's eyes widen, not with fear, but with determination. She wasn't looking at the bandit, but at Thomas, a silent communication passing between them. I said drop it, the man shouted, pressing the knife tighter against Thea's skin. Thomas let the rifle fall, and in that same instant, Thea drove her elbow hard into her captor's ribs, twisting away as his grip loosened. The revolver in her hand barked once, and the bandit crumpled, clutching his thigh. Thomas was beside her in seconds, retrieving his rifle and training it on the wounded man. Anyone else with you? He demanded. The bandit glared up at them, blood seeping between his fingers. Just me and Wade. You shot him. Thomas quickly bound the man's wound, then his hands, and secured him to a tree. We'll send the sheriff to collect you when we reach the trading post, he told the cursing bandit. Be grateful we're not leaving you for the wolves. They broke camp immediately, riding through the night despite the danger. By dawn, they'd put considerable distance between themselves and the bandits. You handled yourself well back there, Thomas said as they paused to rest the horses. Thea brushed hair from her face, exhaustion evident in her posture. I surprised myself. I thought I'd be terrified, but when it happened, I just reacted. That's courage, Thomas told her. Not the absence of fear, but action despite it. She smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed her face and made something catch in Thomas's chest. My father used to say something similar. They reached Miller's Pass by noon the next day, stopping at a small stream to refresh themselves and the horses. The worst of the mountain crossing was behind them, with more gentle terrain ahead. Thomas watched as Thea splashed water on her face, noticing how the sunlight caught in her auburn hair. She'd changed in the short time he'd known her, standing straighter, eyes clearer, the haunted look gradually fading. She glanced up, catching him watching, and instead of looking away, he held her gaze. Thomas, she said softly, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. He moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do, she insisted. You risked your life, your home, everything for a stranger who brought nothing but trouble to your door. Thomas reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're not a stranger anymore, Thea. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Thomas found himself leaning closer, drawn by the warmth in her eyes. Their lips met in a tentative kiss that quickly deepened, speaking of loneliness ended and hope beginning. When they finally parted, Thea's cheeks were flushed, her breathing uneven. I didn't expect. I hoped, but... Thomas smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. I didn't expect it either, but I'm glad it happened. They rode on with renewed purpose, reaching Jackson Freeman's trading post late the following day. The post was a sturdy collection of log buildings nestled in a valley, with the Shoshone Reservation visible in the distance. Jackson, a broad-shouldered black man with graying hair and a booming laugh, welcomed them with open arms. Thomas Calloway, as I live and breathe. Been too long, brother. The men embraced like the old friends they were, and Jackson quickly made Thea feel welcome too. Over a hearty meal, Thomas explained their situation, leaving nothing out. Jackson listened intently, his expression growing serious. Blackwood's a problem, no doubt about it. But he's not the first tyrant I've dealt with, and he won't be the last. Can you help us? Thomas asked. Already thinking on it, Jackson assured them. Judge Reynolds is due here in a week for circuit court. Honest man, doesn't bow to money or threats. If Miss Crawford gives testimony about her treatment, with you backing her story. He nodded thoughtfully. It might be enough for a restraining order at least. Thea looked doubtful. Will paper stop a man like Blackwood? Maybe not, Jackson admitted. But it gives us legal ground to stand on if he comes after you. And the territorial governor's no friend of Blackwood's. There's been talk of investigating his land deals for years. For the first time, Thomas felt genuine hope. So we wait for the judge. You rest, Jackson corrected. Both of you look like you've ridden through hell. I've got clean rooms, hot water, and no one bothers my guests without answering to me. The trading post proved to be the sanctuary they needed. As days passed, Thomas and Thea grew closer, sharing stories of their lives before they met. He told her of the war, of the friends lost, and the nightmares that still occasionally haunted him. She spoke of her father's dreams of striking it rich, of her brief happiness teaching at a small school before his death forced her to seek employment with the Blackwoods. They also spent time with a local Shoshone, with whom Jackson had a respectful trading relationship. An elder woman helped tend to Thea's healing wound, applying a poultice that eased the remaining pain. In the evenings, they sat on Jackson's porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. On the third night, Thomas took Thea's hand in his touch gentle but sure. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about what happens after the judge comes. Thea turned to face him, her expression open. And I want you to know that whatever you decide, whether to stay in Wyoming or go to California, or anywhere else, you won't go alone. Not unless you want to. Her eyes widened. Thomas, are you saying? I'm saying that I care for you, Thea. More than I thought possible in such a short time. And if you'll let me, I'd like to court you properly. See where this leads us. Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. I'd like that very much. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders. Jackson appeared at the door, rifle in hand. Company, he said grimly. And not the friendly kind. Thomas stood, positioning himself in front of Thea. Blackwood. 5 riders. Well armed. Could be his men. They retreated inside, Jackson bolting the heavy door behind them. The trading post was well constructed, with shuttered windows and thick walls defensible if needed. The riders circled the main building before their leader dismounted and approached. Freeman, a voice called. We know you're harboring fugitives. Send them out, and there won't be trouble. Jackson peered through a small opening in the shutters. "It's Jenkins," he confirmed. "Blackwood's right-hand man. And he's brought friends." Thomas checked his revolver. "Options. Back door leads to the storeroom. From there, you could make it to the reservation. Shoshone won't let Blackwood's men cross their land." Thea shook her head firmly. "No more running. These men need to understand I'm not property to be hunted down." "She's right," Thomas agreed. "But we do this smart. Jackson, any chance of backup?" A slow smile spread across Jackson's face. "As it happens, I've got 3 Pinkerton agents staying in the guest cabin. They're escorting a prisoner to Cheyenne. Professional men who respect the law." "Perfect," Thomas said. "Get them. We'll stall." Thomas approached the door while Jackson slipped out the back. "Jenkins," he called. "This is private property, and you're trespassing. Calloway." Jenkins sounded surprised. "Should have known you'd be mixed up in this. Hand over the woman, and we'll let you walk away." "Miss Crawford is under my protection," Thomas replied. "And she has charges to file against Victor Blackwood for imprisonment and attempted murder." A harsh laugh answered him. "That's rich. She's a thief and a liar." "Blackwood treated her like a queen. Then why did you shoot her?" Thomas challenged. "She was stealing his property." "She is not property," Thomas shouted, his patience breaking. "And any man who thinks otherwise deserves neither respect nor obedience." Silence followed his outburst, then the ominous sound of rifles being readied. "You've got 1 minute, Calloway," Jenkins called. "Then we burn this place to the ground." Thea touched Thomas's arm. "Let me speak to them." "Thea, no, trust me," she said, her voice steady. "I need to face them." Reluctantly, Thomas nodded. Thea approached the door. "Jenkins," she called out. "I want to talk. Come out unarmed, and we'll talk all you want." "I'm staying right here," Thea replied. "But you should know that I've prepared a full statement about Victor Blackwood's actions. How he kept me prisoner, how he threatened me when I refused his advances, how you shot me on his orders." "More lies," Jenkins snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "The territorial judge arrives in 4 days," Thea continued. "My statement, along with evidence and witness testimony, will be presented to him." "How do you think that will affect Mr. Blackwood's political ambitions?" The men outside conferred in hushed voices. Thomas used the distraction to position himself at a side window, rifle ready. "You think anyone will believe you over Victor Blackwood?" Jenkins finally responded. "I think enough people will question him that his carefully constructed reputation will crumble," Thea answered confidently. "Rich men have fallen for less." Another silence, longer this time. Then the sound of approaching horses from the direction of the guest cabins. Jackson had returned with the Pinkertons. "What's going on here?" A new voice demanded, authoritative, cutting through the tension. "Private business," Jenkins replied. "Nothing that concerns you." "I'm Agent Daniel Cooper, Pinkerton Detective Agency," the voice announced. "And armed men threatening a trading post very much concerns me. Lower your weapons, gentlemen." A tense standoff ensued, but Blackwood's men were outnumbered now, facing not just Thomas and Jackson but 3 professional lawmen. Gradually they backed down. "This isn't over," Jenkins warned as they mounted their horses. "Blackwood won't forget this." "Neither will Judge Reynolds," Agent Cooper replied evenly. "I look forward to hearing Miss Crawford's testimony myself." They watched the men ride away, the tension slowly dissipating. Thomas wrapped an arm around Thea's shoulders, feeling her trembling slightly despite her brave face. "You were magnificent," he told her. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. "I was terrified, but I kept thinking of what you said about courage." Judge Reynolds arrived as scheduled, a stern man with penetrating eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened carefully to Thea's testimony, questioned Thomas and Jackson about their observations, and reviewed the evidence, including Thea's partially healed gunshot wound. His ruling was swift and unequivocal. Victor Blackwood was to have no contact with Thea Crawford, direct or indirect. Furthermore, the judge ordered an investigation into Blackwood's business practices based on information that had come to light during the hearing. "This won't end his influence overnight," the judge cautioned Thea. "Men like Blackwood don't relinquish power easily. But it's a beginning." For Thomas and Thea, it was more than that. It was a chance to build something new without looking over their shoulders. They married 3 months later in a simple ceremony at Thomas's ranch, which they had reclaimed and begun restoring together. Jackson stood as Thomas's best man, while the schoolteacher from the nearby town attended Thea. As they spoke their vows, Thomas was reminded of the promise he'd made that first night, when she'd stumbled bleeding into his barn and he'd wrapped her in his coat. "I'll never leave you," he whispered as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Thea's smile was radiant, all traces of fear long gone from her eyes. "And I'll never leave you," she promised in return. Their life together wasn't without challenges. Blackwood made one final attempt to harm them, sending men to burn the ranch while they slept, but the Shoshone friends they'd made warned them in time. The resulting confrontation led to Blackwood's arrest and eventual conviction, his empire crumbling as his crimes were exposed. Thomas and Thea expanded the ranch, raising cattle and horses that gained reputation throughout the territory. They built a larger home to accommodate their growing family, first a daughter, Emma, with her mother's spirit and father's steady temperament, then twin boys who brought equal measures of joy and chaos to their lives. On quiet evenings, long after the children were grown with families of their own, Thomas and Thea would sit on their porch and watch the Wyoming sunset, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked him once. "When I stumbled into your barn?" Thomas nodded, his fingers gently stroking her hair, now streaked with silver. "I thank God for it every day, for sending you to me when we both needed someone most." Thea smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart decades earlier. "Who would have thought that the worst night of my life would lead to everything I've ever wanted?" "That's the mystery of love," Thomas replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It finds us when we least expect it, but exactly when we need it most." They remained on their ranch until the end of their days, their love a testament to a promise made and kept through all of life's seasons, a promise that began on a desperate night in 1875 when she stumbled bleeding into his barn, and he wrapped her in his coat and vowed never to leave.